Okay, so a different crowd. This is our first annual Women and Girls Summit, hosted here at the Spectre Center. 3 years ago, I witnessed at the US Open at Drexel a Women's Day, and it was focusing on celebrating women. And when I was watching it, I was so moved by the speakers that I thought it's so important for our young girls in squash to come and hear, learn. There's so many aspects of squash that they can learn from when they're competing on court to off court. So we've had 3 hours of workshops on mental health, on sports performance, on your entourage, how your parents and your coaches all help you navigate. And so our next panel is speaking about being an athlete and the importance in the workforce and how that's perceived. And so we have a really great panel tonight. I'm going to introduce Erin O'Hearn, who's a close friend of mine, who I've met through tennis, and she's a reporter she's been on NBC, MTV, and now she's on MSNBC. She's been doing the early morning show on MSNBC. She also stepped in for Morning Joe. So we're really fortunate to have her here, and she's going to take over.
Thank you so much. That was so nice.
Thank you, Noelle. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Christina Minnis. I work at Goldman Sachs. I've been there for forever. It seems like it's kind of embarrassing how long I've been there. But I run the financing business. I hire a ton of athletes, both men and women. Big believer in what you learn on a sports field or a court. I did play squash. It was probably one of my favorite moments of my high school and college years. I played at Yale. Ended up, one year we played on a national championship team, which was really exciting. And back then, you didn't get to have a lot of summer jobs, but what I learned on that team was really instrumental in my life at Goldman Sachs. And so I will talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Maisha Kelly, and I am the Director of Athletics at Drexel University, where we have the 2022 National Runner-Up Women's Squash Team. So that's a really proud moment for our program. But so I'm just celebrating over a 1-year anniversary of being the Director of Athletics at Drexel. Actually a Philadelphia native, but prior to my return in 2021, I've spent the last 2 decades in college athletics, so at Division I campuses as well as the NCAA. My first career was actually in teaching, so should that come up, that was a really great way for me to enter the professional realm. But as a Division I student athlete at St. Joseph's University, also here in Philadelphia, where I ran track and field and couldn't get away from the sport, married a track coach and a former track and field athlete, and I also have 2 young children who are playing sports, and I could talk all day, but certainly I'm a Dragon, proud to represent Drexel University, and look forward to engaging more.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, I am Erin Malone. I am the Director of Digital Strategy at Free People and FP Movement, who's here today. And I was a collegiate athlete as well. I swam and played water polo at Villanova, so also around here in Philadelphia. And certainly agree, I think that has set me up for success going into the workforce on so many fronts. Just the diligence, the time management, all the wonderful skills that collegiate athletics and athletics in general, it really puts you on a path, sets you apart, I think, from so many other candidates when you're moving into the job market and as you progress throughout your career. So really excited to share some of that with you today.
Hi, my name's Elriani. I've basically been in squash my whole life, starting off as a junior, like some of your kids are doing now. Went on to be a squash pro for 16 years. I can see some of John White and obviously Noelle, a few others that I played, that were playing at the same time as I was playing. Former world number 3, and then I came over to America, and I've been coaching for the last 16 years. 15 of those were at the Heights Casino, where I was directing the program there. And then now I'm really proud to be working at US Squash, and it's really exciting to be part of the development of squash as a national scale, as opposed to just at a club. So I'm really excited with this new role, which I've only been doing for 1 month. but I'm really excited to be here, and especially with this great group of women.
My name is Jamie Zuckerman. I'm a clinical psychologist. I was not a collegiate athlete. However, I did play competitive tennis and then quit my senior year. Don't do that. Now as an adult, I play almost every day with Erin and Narelle. I'm very much in the, still playing, and as a parent, having my children play.
So I wanted to start off asking you a question about the hiring process, because I know you said you hire a lot of athletes. So we all think of collegiate athletes as sort of being this elite group, and certainly it's great for networking. What are some of the characteristics and what are some of the attributes that you find athletes have in common when they're going into the corporate world?
So I think there's a lot you learn, particularly in a sport like squash, where it's individual but a team sport. You learn how to compete. You also learn how to refine what you're working on, and then you also have to figure out that individual versus team. And one of the things that was really instrumental to my own development was we were national champions, outcome champions, all those things my junior year, and I played 5, and I basically had I played well at 5, I didn't lose a match, and then suddenly everyone graduated above me, and I had to be not only one, but I was captain. So I had to learn how to figure out how to lose every single match and lose gracefully, and then also how to kind of keep it together and show leadership to the team, because everyone was really demoralized, having been undefeated and national champions, to suddenly being beaten by almost every team. And so the thing about being an athlete and being on a team, it really teaches you a lot. And it's sometimes I actually worry I over-index to athletes, because I just don't know how you lose. You learn that skill set if you don't have that experience. Right.
Yeah.
So I think, and while not having hired, but I hired lots of people, not into corporate positions, but started my athletics career actually in the life skills space, where we were contacted by a number of industries throughout the course of time, and they were looking for student athletes. And really, I think what it comes down to as well is that there's a skill set. And so you go through your undergraduate years, and certainly you're pursuing an academic pathway and working on your intellectual abilities to apply whatever it might be in the industry you go to. But athletes are also putting into practice a lot of things: teamwork, being organized, balancing a day. We just heard the panel beforehand talk about the balance of the day, and how the question was asked, how do you get to do other things you do, but you also have to figure out how you can, what I call, juggle the glass balls. So how you can maintain your academics, because you need to for eligibility, but also hopefully for your own prestige and award, which I think athletes are wired that way. But it's that organization, it's the ability to work with a team, and certainly you do that in the classroom, but this is really putting into practice. How do you, as an organization, move forward towards a common plan and execute it, and hopefully have success? And when you don't have success, when there are those failures, how do you rebound? How do you build that back up? And I think that's the fitness that student athletes, there's a fitness to life, there's a fitness to what you pursue, no matter student athlete or not. And I think that that's what is a great benefit, is that you're actually putting those things in motion. And you've been here at a school like Drexel, where you're also doing co-ops, since you have that opportunity, and what you're able to show and exemplify and articulate as well in an interview process is critical, thinking about those skill sets that you have. So long-winded, but I could, like I said, I could talk for days about student athletes.
If you don't have, you can add something, or you don't have to.
Would certainly echo all of that. I think one of the things that was talked about in one of the prior panels was being coachable. And I think that is a skill that you pick up as an athlete and put into action that many other students may not actually get on such a regular basis, and that is so critical when you move into the workforce, is the ability to take feedback constructively and then put it into motion and continue to grow. So for many of you, you have probably already developed a really heavy growth mindset, right? You're trying to get better every day, you're really focused on improving, and that feedback is so critical to those next actions and the next steps. that you're going to be taking to reach that goal or move the team forward or bring everyone together. So I think, again, emphasizing that in interviews and resumes is an incredible transferable skill.
I mean, most of the points have obviously been touched on by the fourth person, but I feel like as someone who's been the athlete most of my life, I think just having that work ethic and you know, whatever task I'm given now, I want to do it the best I can do it, and it's just sort of the way I am now. If Kim gives you something to do, I'm going to do it, you know, and I think that's so important. Anything we do, if you're going to do something, do it properly. Otherwise, don't bother. So if you really want to do something, really set your mind to it and do whatever you need to do to get something done and do it the best you can.
Do you mind if I follow up on something? Because I think it would be a great question for Jamie.
So one of the common themes was teamwork, taking constructive criticism, working together, and seeing your work as a collective goal, just not an individual goal, which I think is something athletics really teaches you. I think that has been one of the topics that I've heard in the news and really just in the corporate world right now is the demise of corporate culture, right? And some of that has to do with the pandemic, some of it has to do with we have so many ways to communicate with each other, but those ways are technology driven and technology led. So one of the most valuable things about being an athlete is that you can't go to practice over Zoom. You can't connect with your teammates through a phone call or a text message. And Jamie, I know you do so much about the importance of that on your mental health, of having those connections, those personal connections, not just through social media, because those are just snapshots. Can you talk about how being an athlete and being a part of a team allows you to sort of bypass this technology radical we're in?
So I was going to say, actually, just in work, I work with a lot of college-age athletes too, just in my practice, and I have to say that from a psychologist standpoint, some of the, I don't want to say easiest, but just the most motivated patients I've ever had, because the drive and that organization that you talk about, it's so in therapy language, coachable is the same thing, and it's so easy to work with them. So I just wanted to kind of add that in because I think it's a huge asset to have. But as far as the benefits of having teammates during something like the pandemic and having that connection, is that what you're saying? I mean, it's invaluable, because I think that when you're part of a team, you have this connection, no matter what level team, you know, whether it's college, whether it's just, you know, recreational, that connection that you have is, you can't replace it. There's a uniqueness to it, there's a bond to it, and I think especially during the pandemic when nobody could see each other or talk to each other, that was still there, and it made people feel connected even if they couldn't be physically present with them, and I think that made a huge difference for sure for college athletes. And I can't speak to your own experiences, but I would imagine that that kept people connected.
I can talk a little about culture.
Great, that would be great.
So there's been a lot written about the Goldman Sachs sort of culture, and I'm actually on a partnership committee where we're working on how do we preserve our culture. Now we're 56,000 employees, and the average tenure of our employee is something like 3 years. It's crazy, our growth. And how do we preserve what made Goldman so special as a private partnership and now a big public company? And one of the ways we are going to really focus on doing that is creating basically cohorts and insist that partners spend time together physically. And we recently did something in Austin where we took 20 of our top performing partners and we basically sent them to Austin. We gave them leadership skills, like we did some crazy stuff, like dropped them into their Central Park with a couple of like a knife and a fork and said, go figure out and go live for 5 days. I mean, it was kind of crazy stuff, but what it taught was how to like rely on each other and like be authentic and be human again. And we're spending a lot of time at our firm on that very topic and coming up with ways that we can help our employees be more resilient. And that was the one thing I don't think we didn't talk about that first question, which is why do athletes do so well in business, and particularly a place like Goldman Sachs, which is incredibly competitive, very intense? It's because athletes are resilient. You are taught how to lose, you're taught how to pick yourself back up and get back out there. And when you're working in a place like our firm, where you're going to feel like you're barely passing because everyone is so smart and so talented. Having resilience and knowing how to get back, in the game is so important.
I think that's a great point. When you're talking about resilience, I think another aspect to being an athlete is advocating for yourself. My kids play sports, and my 13-year-old and my 11-year-old, they're responsible for emailing their coaches if they don't feel like they got the playing time that they wanted. It's not mom and dad who are going to go ask them. It is their responsibility, right? Because it's their time, and we're investing in it, they're investing in it. So I wonder, Maisha, with your role, how can athletes take those lessons of standing up for themselves through to the workforce? Because I think it's really easy to send off a text or to get frustrated and leave a job because you feel like you're not getting to where you want to be. But having that resilience and knowing that, sticking with it and understanding what your values are, what you have to improve on, but really sticking up for yourself, I think is a huge lesson that you learn as an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that right, it starts. I have a 6-year-old daughter. We talk now about even make sure if somebody, if you have a friend that's upsetting you, make sure you use your words, right? But she gets to come home each day to me and have that conversation, be coached, and if Mama Bear needs to show up, then Mama Bear shows up and intervenes. You don't have that as much, or certainly we, our expectations is that in college it's a relationship with the student and their coach, the student athlete and their coach. And so my expectations of leadership is that each student athlete should know their place in a program. And so I think it's a little bit twofold. It's one about advocating for yourself, understanding what you need to do to be successful, but then also having some self-awareness, which I think is something that hopefully in a healthy relationship, when you're getting the feedback, you know the work that you need to put in. If you're putting yourself out there to ask about it, let's just say it's moving up in the ladder or a starting position, that it's a dynamic where you're able to have that conversation. I think the other piece, and this goes to the skills that student athletes have, is that you're coming together and it's a team of, let's say, 10 individuals, all from different places, perhaps different values with regard to their families, but now needing to work in one value and actually being able to articulate to each other when there are differences, again, because as a team you have team values, you've had set goals. And so I think that really it's a function of a captain, head coaches, and certainly our support as administration. Go and manage that relationship. Go and speak to your faculty member if you're having a challenge academically. Go and speak to your coach if you need to figure out what it is you need to do differently, but then also digest it in such a way where you're either going to apply and be able to move yourself along, but also really hone in and develop your self-awareness, because that is something that I think is critical in the workplace and in life.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think as far as advocating for yourself, I think developing goals as you leave athletics and move into the workforce can be really tricky. Something I think that's talked about more these days, but maybe still not enough, is kind of what happens to that identity crisis when you leave being a collegiate athlete and you move into a new chapter of your life, and maybe you had a really clear goal for a career, or maybe you've gone through some exploration and you're testing the waters, but again, asking for help, not feeling like you can't reach out to people. When you're in college, a lot of the time, you're gonna have mentors there, you're gonna have your team. That will hopefully still be there wherever you go to work, and it is in many places, but it may not be. Hopefully you have a manager that's gonna advocate for you, but at the end of the day, your success and your forward growth is actually still gonna come down to you. So the same way that you're setting your own goals now, your improvement or whatever it is you're working from a skill perspective, taking that into the workforce and really holding on to that and being I can drive my career in the same way that I drove my athletic career in college and before. So I think that's something really important to take, acknowledge, and keep building on as you go into the workforce.
I mean, when I retired from being a pro athlete, I then had to obviously go out in the workforce in a completely different way. as did a few in here too. And I think one of the things that's really important is that I've obviously stayed in squash, so for me, it didn't matter that I wasn't playing pro anymore, I just wanted to stay in squash. So whatever your passion is, I think you need to know what area you want to go into, and then go down that route. And then, as you said, sometimes it's not going to work out, but keep advocating, keep working at it, and eventually you'll find your spot. But I think it's important to find what gives you joy, and then just go with that, which I've done my whole life, basically.
So I'll just speak to resiliency in general, but there's an idea or concept called psychological immunity, and it's kind of what you were talking about. This sense of resiliency is fostered, right, as you're growing up, and it's the degree to which your caregivers get involved too quickly to take away the bad feelings. So you see your kids upset and you want to intervene because there's nothing worse than seeing your kids upset. But if you continuously intervene to take away the bad feelings, what you're doing is, while you're making yourself feel better as the parent, because we all understand we want to do that, you're depriving the kid of the ability to learn to regulate their emotions, to kind of problem solve on their own, and to tolerate the discomfort that comes from, stuff that happens. And so what I found often was when kids would get to college and they didn't have these skill sets, things like losing, things like getting a bad grade, not making a team, were not handled well because that sense of psychological immunity had not been developed. So it's really important to be able to learn how to deal with your emotions and to not want to just get rid of it so fast, because it really teaches you emotion regulation strategies it's necessary for life, as you can hear. So
if we could talk a little bit about the aspect of winning versus just enjoying the ride, number one, and working towards a goal that may not be monetary, just like it may in the corporate world or when you go into the professional world. Maybe the goal isn't monetary, just like maybe the goal isn't always winning right away. But having that personal satisfaction of accomplishing something. How do you parallel athletics with that? Because I know obviously, when you get into the collegiate level, the goal is to win, right? But when you have gone through youth sports and you go through being on an adult tennis team or an adult squash team, you realize that there's so much more value to it than just the winning, and it really is a journey. So Christina, can you just start by giving some advice to realistic goals when graduates enter the professional world, and what should they expect of themselves the first few years out of school?
Yeah, I was going to say, for those of you that don't know immediately what you want to do when you grow up, don't worry, don't panic. It's okay. I think one of the biggest issues facing all of you guys compared to when I graduated from college was there's just so much you can do, and it's really overwhelming if you don't have this beacon, like it sounds like you did, to be a professional squash player. Or when I graduated from Yale, half the class went into investment banking. I'm not kidding you, 50% of the people from Yale went to banking that year. It's like what you did. Now you guys graduate and a lot of people don't know what to do. So don't panic if you don't know what to do, because you'll be able to find your way. I think when you get to the workforce, at least when I coach the folks I hire at Goldman, I say, listen, breathe. You just got here. You got here, and our acceptance rate is actually 1.5%. That's the acceptance rate to get into Goldman Sachs as a senior from college. So if you end up at the firm, you're really smart and you're really great. Don't feel like you have to perform. Don't feel like you have to go win. Just get to know people. Get to understand the culture of our firm and be really authentic. And so I spend most of my time with the 21 and 22-year-olds that work for me, really encouraging them to breathe, get to know the place, ask a ton of questions, and don't have that frenetic, I have to perform, I have to prove I belong here. And I think that's one of the things we have to sort of be careful of as college athletes. We get into an environment and we're expected to perform. When you enter the workforce, you know, it's not like you're a freshman and you can beat the senior and be number one on the ladder. When you get to your firm or your company or marketing, I don't care how smart you are the low man on the totem pole or the low woman on the totem pole. You can't possibly be number one. And so you have to learn and you have to be, you know, very humble and like listen a lot, which is very, very different than being an elite college athlete, where you think if you just work a lot harder, you'll be number one on the ladder. It's not how it works in corporate America.
Just from a completely different perspective, when I went into being a squash professional, there was no financial gain at all from that, but a lot of joy came from trying to follow a dream. So again, going back to what I said before a little bit, I personally don't think, anyway, this is my philosophy, might not be anybody else's, but I think that finding something that you enjoy and that you really get something from is more important than worrying about, is it going to make me $1 million, you know, a year or whatever. So, and then you'll make, whatever your joy is, you'll find a way to make a living out of that. And then you never really feel like you're working in your life, even though you're working your ass off sometimes, excuse my French, but you never feel like that because you're doing something you really want to do.
So,
I think this is my first time in the Arlen Specter Squash Center, and I continue to be amazed looking around just what an incredible building it is, how accessible it is for so many people, and what great things it's going to do for the game of squash, being located here in Philadelphia, and just the work that Narelle and everyone puts into making sure that people understand the importance of the sport and giving back. Maisha, what do you think about just the importance of diversity in all different sorts of sports, making them accessible, whether it's squash or tennis or soccer or hockey? We need to open it up to more students, more athletes, because I think the greater the pool that we pull from, the greater the sports are.
So actually, I mentioned earlier, I'm a native of Philadelphia. I came up by way of tennis was my first sport. National Junior Tennis League would do public courts programs, and so for $25 during the summer, you could go to one of the city courts and have a summer camp of tennis. And then I swam for PDR, so actually Philadelphia Department of Recreation's PDR, swam here in West Philadelphia at Sayre, but also at Memorial Hall. And all that to say is that their sport has, so again, to go to my track bias, I think that I am a product of a sport that really stretches across a broad spectrum of diversity in all the categories that one may capture with regard to diversity. I think that sport, no matter what you play, is a great tool for all the things we're talking about as far as your skill set, but your socialization and access. For me, running track became an opportunity where I had access to traveling and meeting different people, different educational opportunities. I think that everybody probably has that thing that sport provided for them, and so the more we make sports accessible, I think the model that was built here with the certainly the vision of our president, John Fry, our Drexel University's president, and the relationship with U.S. Squash, and having really our squash program's 10 years old. I mentioned earlier that our women were the national runner-up, our men were ranked 7th last year, so I think even just the power of the competitive, we've got neighbors a couple blocks over, 2 that have a pretty good squash program, but I think that we have an ecosystem here and a model where if you partner with NGBs, I know USA Swimming does the similar models, and so access it matters. I think it matters the way we look to diversify companies, the way we look to diversify universities, and it's critical, and we just have to figure out how within the systems that exist, how we can create those avenues that aren't just one-way streets.
Well, I know that US Squash, one of the things that's really important to US Squash is trying to make it more diverse, more accessible. And one of the things that they've been working really hard on recently is trying to get squash out into the parks and playing. Like Kim and Sakura recently went to LA to teach a course on handball courts, which obviously is not your conventional way of playing squash, but that would be so cool that you could go into a park and a lot of people playing a version of squash on a handball court, and anyone can go and play and join in, and that could happen in any part of the country, especially on the West Coast where it's warm all year round. Obviously it wouldn't be so fun in Boston in the winter, but it could certainly work on the West Coast and parts of the time on the East Coast. So I know that's a big part of what US Squash are working towards, amongst many other things. But it's so important that you're not just playing squash because you're a member of a private members club, that you can just go and play squash. You know, so it's not easy to do, but US Squash are working really hard to try and make that happen.
And on that note, are we trying to get more women coaches in
Yes.
squash?
We would love to see more women playing, more women coaching, and part of my job is professional development, so that's one of the things I'll be trying to tackle along the way as well, definitely.
Right.
So I try to make these transitions smooth, but when we're talking about making sports more accessible and we're talking about teamwork and resiliency, another thing that I've learned in my professional career and really just through my adulthood is not just the importance of working hard and working on your career and building your family, but the importance of giving back. And that can happen at a really, really young age. You don't have to wait until you can write a check to a foundation. I mean, your time is your most valuable asset, right? And when you start giving that back, you have no idea the kind of impact it has on people. I would just ask you, the panel, if you could talk about how when you're captain of a team or you are the senior, that sort of is instilled in you, right? Giving back, because you naturally mentor the younger players. So how can you take some of those skills, and because I think that becomes not only part of being an athlete, but part of being a good human being. Have you noticed that athletes tend to give back more or to want to contribute more to their communities?
Just your observations. Sorry.
So I think what I've observed in the workplace, that particularly athletes that I've hired that have been either captains or led teams, I notice how they lead their teams. And even younger employees that are maybe 25, 26, if I've got one who's working for me now that was captain of the Yale team a number of years ago, and watching how he runs the people that are underneath him is really great. Like, he definitely approaches it from a mentoring, training, like trying to make the first year analysts really understand the model versus just get it done. I gotta get home, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever. And I do notice a big difference between those that have been athletes in terms of giving back to training and bringing up the next generation. I guess as it relates to charities and foundations, I don't really see myself a big difference between non-athletes and athletes on the idea of like investing in communities and getting involved in charities you care about. But I definitely see how athletes treat their teams very, very differently.
Yeah, I don't know if I can speak to, do I see student athletes, former student athletes giving back more than others, but I do think that it becomes, and it's not just the financial give back you talked about. There's even things that even now I, as a 45-year-old professional, I didn't think I was 45, but I am, so Drexel athletes. But there's things I reflect back on, moments that I had when I was a team captain, or dynamics, those social dynamics, and even now being able to sit in the seat that I do, there's probably not an email that I don't respond to or an ask for setting up a meeting just to talk to hear about my career path and those inroads, because I think it's just so important. So I do think I see a lot of my peers in my network do that, take the time, because somebody did that for them. It's the reach back, right? Reach back and lift as you rise. approach. And so I know that we need to do more of that, and particularly women in our industry. But I know that's something that I'm very committed to, and have a group of other women who are in this industry doing the same. And the give back, so for our Drexel student athletes, there's always an opportunity. Of course, philanthropy matters, and so that's important too, giving back to those that helped you move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I was going to add is that, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to even be from a place of being the team captain or like leader per se on your team. I think as an athlete, you're equipped with such a wonderful just team camaraderie and that spirit that really like helps lift other people up. So again, like taking that back, taking it into the workforce, making people feel welcome. Maybe it's staying connected with like your alumni association or where you played in high school, or just keeping those connections there. And you know, one of the best things you can do is just keeping an open door for questions and encouraging others to pursue similar endeavors or whatever is bringing them joy.
I really agree that mentoring is so important. When I was running the program 15 years at the last job, I set up a mentoring program, and the oldest kids would mentor the kind of middle-aged kids, and the middle-aged kids would mentor the youngest kids, and we do that regularly throughout the season. And it was really incredible to see how the kids would, first of all, when I set it up, I thought, oh, I need to structure this, and then I just sort of thought, you know what, I'm going to let the kids go and see how they do it. And I was always amazed how well they treated the other kids and how they taught them, and I was super proud of the way they went about it. And it was good for them to see how when the little kids left, how excited they were that they got to be on court with this slightly older person who had more experience. And I think that's good for the kids to learn that. And so anytime any of you at college or wherever have a chance to do that, I think you will never understand how valuable it is. So like, as you said, if you can give 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, whatever, always try and do that if you possibly can, because it really does make a difference, I think.
I don't have much to add. I would just say that I think at least in my field of work, I don't think I've ever not been willing to mentor or help somebody. I think it's kind of our obligation in a way. And I think that it just helps, it can't hurt. And so I always give back. I don't think there's ever really been a time where even if someone just emails me just to say, you know, how do I apply to grad schools, or what am I looking for in grad schools, or just in jobs, it takes 5 minutes, like you said, and I think it makes such a huge impact that we don't even realize, because it could be 10 years down the road for that person, but at least we got them started.
Or how can I improve my forehand? My serve. We have time for one more question. I'm actually going to start with Jamie, because this to me I always think about being a part of a team, especially as a woman in today's world, and you do a lot with your work on this, but young women and young girls see so much on social media. It's all about, not only about how they look, but they're always competing with each other, and not in a healthy way, right? Not on a squash court, not on a tennis court, not on a basketball court. It's competing in ways that are superficial and not psychologically healthy. But I think as an athlete, what you do is you learn to connect to other women, and you learn to lift each other up. And maintaining a position on a team, even in your 40s, helps with that, because you need to work on that. It's like going to the gym, right? Like, you can't go once and expect to be in shape for the rest of your life. You have to continuously work on it. So what sports has told me, even through middle age, is that it allows you to meet people you never would have met. It allows you to be happy for other people, to lift each other up. And that translates into the business world, into the corporate world. You build amazing friendships. You want to give back. You want to mentor. You're not sitting there thinking it's all about me and why is she getting a promotion and why am I am not. So Jamie, can you talk about, especially in today's world, when we're just getting snapshots of people's lives, how important athletics and team sports are?
We talked about this earlier, and I can.
Sorry.
No. I think for the people that weren't here, I think it's so important. So we know with social media, it gives you a snapshot, and I was saying that, you know, all of us take selfie. It's not the first thing we post. We crop it. We take 900 of them. We filter it. And everything you see is pretty much filtered, and we see our best version of, or everyone puts their best version on social media. And I was saying, rarely does anyone take a picture of themselves while they're crying in their car, or, screaming at their children, or whatever. So we have to be really careful with the social comparison piece, because it is a rabbit hole to nowhere. And we're also comparing ourselves against something that is unattainable and doesn't exist in the first place. So what you were saying, as far as kind of outside of that, I can speak to our team. I mean, it is such a, it saves your sanity. I mean, it's real connections, and you're moving, you're competing, but it's friendly competition. You connect with people that you wouldn't normally ever connect with. And you kind of find your group, but in a very healthy way, and everything you see, it's real. Whereas, with social media, the connections that you have and the friendships, quote, friendships that you have, are based on how many likes you have, how many comments you have, who sends you a friend request, who doesn't return your message but returns somebody else's message. And so I think it's a really dangerous, because I think we judge our self-worth, or at least we have a tendency to judge our self-worth based on how other people are perceiving us, and that's a really dangerous place to be, when your mood and your view of yourself is contingent on other people. So I think that's why connections in real life, in sports, whatever level, is so, so important.
I think on that same front, as you are thinking about the types of companies, or maybe you're starting to interview for internships and jobs, I think this is something that's really important to ask about. I know, or hopefully you've been encouraged by your career center to, it's not just about you being interviewed, but it's as much about you finding if it's a fit. So you should feel very free to ask about things like culture. Try to get a feel for, are the people who are working together also friends? Maybe they're doing things outside of work, albeit not mandatory. Would be a great way to say, yes, this is a group of women that are propping each other up, they've built those bonds, they're creating a network. Looking for an authentic answer, I think, when you're kind of probing those questions about culture, values, teamwork, how projects get done, how collaboration works, what are the actual processes that they have in place to ensure that collaboration is really, it is a teamwork, right? It's not just this kind of dictated, this is how you'll get things done, in order to sustain that network and kind of build each other up. So there are questions you can certainly, I would encourage you to ask as you're thinking about the careers that you're going to move into.
I would say the same exact thing, and for those that are looking to pursue a collegiate athletic career, it's that official visits, unofficial visits, coming around, seeing teams when they're competing, if they're in your area, if you're able to get to the campus. Culture was exactly my thought, that matters, and it's perhaps, I agree, it's not about chasing a paycheck. These relationships are important. It's what you do for the rest of your life, your 4 years of undergraduate, or 5 years, or whatever your graduate work will be. That sets you up for the culture and the expectations that you have for the next 45 years or so of your life as you enter an organization.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here and for your attentiveness. Good luck to all of you in your journey, and we're all gonna